Welcome back to the Salem News Reporters. I'm Rick Moore. This is MSO News Sports, and we welcome in Paul Leighton, Dustin, Luca, and Caroline Enos. Nice to see the terrific trio here, and happy holidays to all of you. Paul, let's start. We'll do seniority this time. We'll go from seniority to the junior most member in that order. Yes, and Dustin, you're in the middle, so there we go. um, Paul, stuff going on. It sounds like a broken record, but I think it's very important. You have been investigating the old Varian property for some time now, and maybe a quick update on what's going on there.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Yeah, I wrote about it last week only because this is the first, I would say, visible sign of what the company is now trying to do in its, renewed efforts to clean up this site. So this is a contaminated site in Beverly right off of Route 128. You can see it when you're heading up toward Gloucester on 128 North on the right, and it's been contaminated for years. The contamination is in the groundwater underneath, and it's been flowing into the neighborhood, and neighbors are concerned. So they've been trying to get rid of the chemicals from the groundwater for 30 years unsuccessfully, but there's been this renewed effort in the last couple of years now. The company Varian is spending a lot more money, millions of dollars, and with these new techniques to clean it up. But one interesting one, there's a stream that runs near the neighborhood that's being impacted. It's downhill from the Varian site, and neighbors a few years ago noticed this little sort of orangey spot on the banks, and it was a seep from underground that comes up, and it showed that some of these chemicals were coming up through the stream bank, and so anyway, Varian tested it, and they said it's safe. You'd have to play in the thing for like years and years and years, play in the water, that
Yeah.
type of thing.
Okay.
But it's a big concern, and the levels were still higher than they should be. So the bottom line is the company just a month ago installed these barriers. They're like Brita filters, two of them, big ones, on the stream bank where the chemicals were coming up. They filter out the chemicals so that they don't get into the stream. If that makes sense. So it's just a symbol of, and it's just actually a small part of the cleanup. The big stuff is happening on the site where they're doing, thermal heating. They're superheating the groundwater to get rid of the chemicals. This is all still going to take a year or two more, but I thought it was interesting where you can actually see something visible and tangible, because most of this stuff, the chemicals are invisible and they're underground, So I've been writing about something for 3 years and you can't see anything. Now you can see these Brita filters on the stream bank. So I thought that was interesting just to show the
I was just
progress.
thinking of who would play you in the movie when this comes to the big
Yeah,
screen.
that's a good, let's
No,
have a contest.
no, it's been important, and I know you follow
Definitely
this.
not going to be Robert Redford. We know that.
No, no. Dustin, let's go over to you. You're primarily covering Salem, and Paul primarily Beverly, but there's a lot of cross-pollination here. Just maybe taking things in a little bit different order, in terms of the environment, pollution, and so on. There's something you mentioned that I saw about sewer in Salem.
Yeah, so this is kind of a terrifying situation that so far has turned into nothing, and kind of what everybody's dreading is the day that it turns into something. So, Willow Avenue is a street in Salem that is kind of down by the water. In fact, it reaches out to the water because it has a beach that has a very well-known sewer line that is actually above ground. During high tide, you tend to not see it. During low tide, it's very obvious. There's basically a massive, I think it's a 20-inch main that goes one way, and then there's a 24-inch main that connects in this direction. The concern is the fact that it's actually above ground. If a boat goes stray or something like that and hits it, this is raw sewage that's coming from people's homes in Salem, and all that sewage goes straight into Salem Harbor, which would be an absolute disaster. And then not only on top of that, if this were to happen, these lines were to break, and you'd also have not just a sewer going into the harbor, you'd also have salt water going into people's homes. So there's all these different problems, and people are kind of like, okay, we just hope that nothing ever hits this. There's been a number of close calls over the last couple of years where massive storms have basically caused boats to break from their moorings. And the last really kind of horrific storm that took out the Salem Willows Pier also put a boat directly over the sewer line and dropped it on the other side. So that thing was like this far from hitting the line and taking it out. So the city council just spent $300,000 to basically put in a couple of emergency valves. So if something actually hits this thing over the next couple of years, they have like a really quick and easy way to shut everything off. Granted, nobody's gonna be able to flush their toilets for a while, but at least the sewer's not gonna be going into the ocean. And then after that, they need to grapple with what the heck are we going to do with that line? And they're kind of starting to engineer that project. But that's going to be further on down the line, way more than $300,000. What they're doing right now is just something to basically put a couple of caps in place. So, like if you remember the BP oil spill, when that thing blew up, there was no way anybody had any way to respond to that. Salem's kind of trying to get ahead of the possible impending blowout and to basically say, okay, if something does happen, this is what we're going to do to put something in place so that there's not some sort of ecological catastrophe.
I wonder if they might get a hold of Gloucester officials, because for years there was a broken sewer line, way before Caroline's time, but the raw sewage went out into Gloucester Harbor, and they used to call it the bubbly. It was all bubble up, and it was really pretty gross throughout all of the beaches that people now go on in the harbor,
Yeah.
Pavilion Beach and Half Moon Beach, and those. You could not swim in that for years. So yeah, that's something to keep an eye on for sure. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it's something that the officials in that area just for the last 15, 20 years have just been watching that pipe and just hoping that nothing happens while they're
Wow.
kind of working on this in the background. So,
All right. Thank you for that, Caroline. Let's go to Peabody. What's the news coming out of Peabody? You've had so many stories go. I don't even know where to start. So you start for me, please.
Sure. So there's been a ton of development in Peabody this year, especially, with housing, and now there's been a lot of development on the city side. So it's been a very busy year for the city. This Mayor Ted Betancourt recently announced that, and the city council voted to approve this, that the city is going to buy 135 acres of land up off Granite Street and abuts the Meadows Golf Course, Cedar Grove Cemetery, Spring Pond, very undeveloped area of Peabody, to preserve that land as open space in perpetuity. He purchased it for $9 million. It's the second major purchase of land up in that area this year. So back in the spring, the city purchased about 80 acres abutting that property, I think for about $7.2 million. And this one's really significant because it's land owned by Rousselot, which is a pharmaceutical grade gelatin plant in downtown Peabody that's closing on the 31st, which is a big deal because it's one of the last downtown factories and plants in Peabody, which was known for years as a tannery site. So there's still a lot of debate, or not debate, but a lot of kind of questions about what's going to happen with the rest of Rousselot's land, because this isn't the downtown plant that everyone sees when they drive through Peabody. It's kind of up in West Peabody, where you don't really go unless you're going to the golf course or whatever. So there's been talks from the city of kind of what's going to happen next with this. They might purchase more land to kind of preserve as open space and to buy some water rights from Rousselot, because they own about 400 acres across the city, including that 135. So there's a lot of ideas for what people would like to see, especially at the downtown plant, since that is so central and no one wants to look at an ugly building falling apart. And it's also near the middle school and the police station, which again, with this idea of city development, the mayor is pursuing a new public safety building that would include not only the police station at that spot, but also the fire administration building. So it's a lot going on. But I think the city is excited about it because Peabody I think a lot of Peabody residents have felt that it is being overdeveloped, especially in terms of housing. Since there's especially a ton of 40Bs coming up. It feels like every week there's a new 40B or a new update with a 40B, which for those who don't know is considered, usually it's like a development that goes, and there's usually 20-25% of those units are considered affordable housing. Whether or not they're actually affordable, that's a whole other thing, but I digress. So that's one of the bigger things happening right now.
There's a difference between the word affordable and low income, and they don't necessarily equate, unfortunately, for those who need housing.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, we'll keep our eye on that, or at least you will, and then we'll talk to you about it. So you do the work, and we get to get the information. Paul, with respect to a nursing home situation, I mean, you actually do, all of you cross the border for the town you're in from time to time. So what else is going on?
Yeah, so there's the situation at a nursing home in Danvers called Hathorn Hill. And somebody had contacted me, sent me a photo of how they had a display in their lobby of an offer for a free raffle. You can enter a raffle for free for a KitchenAid mixer. And if you give them a 5-star review online, So I wrote a story about that and how a lot of people thought that's not the most ethical thing to sort of bribe people to give a favorable review for a nursing home. But anyway, then I got a couple calls after that story ran and basically found out that the state just the week before had declared that had inspected the nursing home and said that made this determination the residents were in quote immediate jeopardy of which sounds pretty serious, and it is in this. And so anyway, they're in this. The state wouldn't give me the report to say exactly what's wrong in there, but the nursing home has, like, I think 23 days to correct the problems that the state identified. State doesn't close it or anything. They just have to fix up what's wrong. But anyway, I've written a lot about nursing homes over the years, and sometimes I feel badly because like the people who work in there, they're underpaid and overworked, and it's really a difficult situation for them. But the biggest problem is, I think, that a lot of these nursing homes locally and everywhere else, they're owned by these companies. There's all this consolidation, and they're owned by these companies that aren't local. The company that owns this one in Danvers is called Genesis. They own, I don't know, 300 nursing homes across the country, and so how much attention are they paying, and how much of your resources are they devoting to these places? So anyway, we're keeping an eye on that. Unfortunately, the condition inside of a lot of these nursing homes is not great. It's really a difficult situation.
That's tough. That's tough to investigate and to report on, because not only are you trying to do a public service, but also you're getting into some private lives there. I mean, you're not invading private lives, but what I'm saying? You're getting down personal. Just an off the wall question: how often do you respond to a tip, or when you get a tip, a phone call from someone who identifies him or herself, or doesn't identify himself? How often, in the course of a professional reporter's career, how often do you follow up on tips?
Yeah, well, I would say that we always call back and check it out and see how legitimate it might be. And like in this case, it's and we have to verify everything on our own. So in this case, this person whose mother had been in the nursing home had sent this photo of this raffle display, but then I asked, but he took the photo in October, and I'm like, yeah, well, is it still there? And he didn't know, but I went over there and saw it was still there, and then followed up and did the reporting myself. So it's I think unless it's so off the wall, we don't think it's worth the story. I mean, we always welcome tips and follow up, but we have to verify everything on our own.
Yeah, there have been times Bill and I do news, as you know, and sometimes I come across something that I don't feel comfortable investigating, doing this as a website. And, we're primarily sports, but we like to cover the news as well. And we try to talk positive. And every now and then I'll come across something, and I'll call a reporter at the Times and, identify myself.
Yeah.
And they will go check up on it. And invariably, they will follow up. And you guys have to write some stuff. You're obligated to do it, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's a tough job. And so I do appreciate that. Dustin, let's bring it up a little bit. Talk about some honors. McCarthy, Rand, those names come to mind.
Yeah. And this is another great example of a crossover, and a weird one, because so I came to the city of or to the Salem News in 2014, and one of my first assignments, I'd heard about this trash finders ball in the city of Beverly, and I was like, well, that sounds really interesting. It was at I think the Italian Social Club at the time, or the Italian Community Club. There was somebody in there named Estelle Rand who was wearing trash bags, and I was like, well, that's interesting. And they were like, oh yeah, this is the Ward 2 city councilor, and it's like, wearing trash bags, and absolutely perfect. Just she was new at the time, getting really into her community. She was looking to build the Ward 2 Civic Association, and here we are 10 years later. She did not run again, and so there's somebody else that's going to be stepping in next year on inauguration day. So Estelle Rand, with 5 really successful terms representing downtown Beverly, which is one of the hottest wards in Beverly. And then on the other side of the bridge, you have somebody who's leaving with 18 years of experience in Ward 1, which isn't downtown. So it isn't like the hive of activity that Estelle had to deal with. but Bob McCarthy was still somebody who held a lot of really, really important positions in the city. Most notably, this past year was acting mayor. He actually served as the city's 51st mayor between Kim at 50 and then Dominic at 52 for 5 months to basically ease the city through transition, get the budget done, which was an insane thing to have to deal with when you have zero experience building budgets, other than just reviewing them year after year after year after year. So Estelle was honored at the final city council meeting this past Monday in Beverly. You know, they gave a really, really beautiful, wide-reaching resolution that kind of talked about all the different things that she's accomplished in the past 10 years, all the community building efforts, all the different environmental causes that she advanced. And then over in Salem to end their last city council meeting, which I think was a week and a half ago at this point, they had a lot of beautiful comments for Bob, basically kind of sending him on his way. He served, I think it was 9 terms in Ward 1, after first challenging and going up against Luca Conchado, I think in 2005. So they're two very well respected leaders that had, you know, whether you agreed with them, some of the decisions they made, disagreed with them, you know, whether you liked the way they handled public comment or not, they're people that had massive levels of positive influence on their cities. And as they were bowing out, the cities were just like, you know, well deserved. So
Yeah,
that's
good
up.
stories. Yeah, we followed that. We followed both of those from the Salem News, and I will again link to your stories after we post this. Good stuff, and it's great to hear that kind of coverage, because I think with municipal cities and towns, it's easier to complain about what government is doing or not doing. I don't know. I'm going to throw this phone away in a second here, but geez. I don't think people realize how much time is involved in these endeavors and how much you mentioned stress. So it's great to hear and see that kind of honor being.
And one thing that's worth mentioning too, because obviously these are just two counselors that are leaving out of entire bodies of people that are really kind of volunteering their time. They do receive stipends, but they're not that big. I don't know Beverly's off the top of my head, but I know Salem's, the city council, gets a stipend that's worth 10% of the mayor's salary, which I think is $15,000 now, which is not commiserate with the literally full-time hours that they put into going to meetings, to answering emails, to showing up at ribbon cuttings. There's a lot of different things that go into being a city councilor, to representing your ward, to representing your neighbors. And it's part of the reason why these people leave is because they want to return to their previous lives. They want to be with their family. And I know in at least one of the cases, that's what we're talking about here. So,
yeah. Well, I know, going back to what Paul was mentioning with nursing homes, I do have a neighbor who was a nursing home nurse. And after 9 years, she couldn't do it anymore. She just couldn't do it. And these are things that I think people should know about, because sometimes we take it for granted when, you just do. And it's good stories, good to publicize that. Caroline, going back to Peabody, some good news over there, I guess, this season in terms of the high school.
Yes, yeah, they're finally getting a new high school. The one they have now is falling apart and quite ugly. I will say affectionately. I call it the big brown box because it's literally a big brown box. It was built in 1970, and it seems like all those kind of that era of buildings is falling apart, and it's time for a new one. Like I mentioned, the public safety building earlier, the police department now was built around the same time as a high school, and it's been long overdue. So with this big announcement, it came last week. The Massachusetts School Building Authority invited Peabody into its core program, which basically is if you need a new school or a major renovation of a school. So there's still kind of more red tape and stuff that the city has to go through. Though once you kind of get invited in, you're pretty much set, because they wouldn't invite someone in that wasn't ready, really. So right now they're in an eligibility period where the state's just making sure that they have all their stuff squared away, that they're ready for a new building and ready to help with this endeavor. And then they'll go through another vote, and then they'll be part of the feasibility period, which is when we'll see what the cost will be, what the design will be. There's talk of maybe keeping some parts of the current high school, like the auditorium and gym, because they're so large and it's hard to get that size that they have today. So it might be a completely brand new school, might be, just a new academic wing, which would be most of the school. But I know the city is very excited. The building now, it's, like I said, falling apart. I mean, it's not ADA accessible. Kids in wheelchairs can't physically fit through the doors of classrooms, which I thought was very interesting because I didn't think that, that would be allowed at all. So, and I know in some of the science labs, like there was some, I think 6 kids who went to the hospital one time for chemical inhalation because the fume hoods weren't working. So it's just all this stuff, the systems aren't up to date. The electrical system can't support a lot of the new technology in science labs and CTE programs, which the city's really trying to build up in Peabody. Since I know there's a lot of talk around Essex Tech and whether or not it's easy to get into. For a lot of kids, it isn't. So it's like they're really trying to build up their own program in Peabody to provide an alternate kind of education for kids without having to leave. So I'm excited to see how this plays out. I know Salem just got approved for a new high school this year too, as Dustin has written about. So it'll be interesting to see the parallels with that, which I'm pretty sure he'll have some more insight in an article about soon, which I'm very excited to read.
Yeah, well, you guys are being challenged by the Newburyport Daily News with respect to that because of the Newburyport's relationship with Whittier Tech.
Yeah.
And they want to build a $450 million school. You could buy a fighter jet for that, but I'm not going to editorialize or get into that. But
but can that fighter jet teach calculus though? That's the thing.
Well, yeah, right. They could build them, I suppose. And the thing is it's become a competition, I think, sometimes between the folk schools and the high schools. I know Caroline at Gloucester High School used to have one of the best vocational, still is a great vocational department, but it's been decimated by budget cuts over the last 30, 40 years. And so the Gloucester kids are fortunate enough to be able to go to Essex Tech. But it just seems if cities and towns could take that money and invest it in their own public school. But on the other hand, I don't want to take away from, places like Essex Tech. To me, it's a very, very confusing problem.
Yeah. And that's been a huge debate in Danvers, especially. I mean, I stepped away from Danvers and now our new reporter, Mike McHugh, has taken it over. So he'll be, I'm sure, writing about this issue too. But, there's been this concern that Essex Tech is, it's too expensive for sending communities, that it pulls resources away from sending communities' own programs, and that it's just because it costs so much to send a kid out of district, it's just less incentive or less resources for the kids still there. So that's a whole other thing.
Right. Well, we'll leave that for another day.
Yeah.
I want to finish up to see if there's any stories of the season, if you've covered any events, if you've met Santa Claus or anything like that. And Caroline, I believe you covered something recently. So any story or stories you could relate?
Yeah, there's been a few, but the most recent one was in Salem last night. It was at the Hive Workspace, which is this really cool collaborative space in downtown Salem that has conference rooms and office spaces that you can rent out either just for like the afternoon or for semi long term. And it's a really good place for entrepreneurs and small businesses kind of get their start. So one of those small businesses that is located there last night organized an event at the space in partnership with the Hive as a little Santa photo op. It was really cute. It was a bunch of kids and pets and families, which was really fun to see. And it was for a good cause. So the couple that plays Mr. And Mrs. Santa Claus, or Mr. and Mrs. Claus, they are Wilmington residents who have done this every year since 2020. They'll go to different communities and host these kinds of events. And while they're there, they collect donations for charities, local charities in need. So I believe this year they've raised like $15,000 so far. And the woman who invited them, her business is really cool too. So her mother-in-law, who she's very close to, is in need of a heart transplant, and so she started up this business of I know a lot of people know this, but that's also kind of a new concept where it's like you go and you get welded on jewelry, and it's a lot of times significant. So you get one with like your sister, your friend, your partner, or whatever, and all the money that she makes through that goes towards supporting mother-in-law's medical bills. So it's just a very nice community event all around, and it's good to see it this time of year.
Excellent. Thank you. Dustin, any activity on your end?
There's all kinds of stuff going on. It's tough to really pinpoint anything. I mean, like yesterday, I'm totally surprised by this. I don't know why I didn't know about this, but there's a theater company in Salem that likes to do a Christmas Carol on the trolleys. I got a chance to ride on that yesterday, and oh my God, it was the most amazing thing on the planet. Actually riding a trolley with Ebenezer Scrooge as he goes through a change of heart, and his heart grows 3 sizes larger, all that other stuff. But no, it's just there's a lot going on. Just try to get out in the towns, enjoy the time. Yeah.
I forgot to ask you about the Scarlet Letter while we're on the.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and this was like a beautiful gift idea. And at this point, I think your only hope to get it for Christmas is Amazon Prime, which it is available on Amazon Prime. The reason why you would want to get it on Amazon Prime is because there's a special feature on the re-release that just came out in November that includes footage filmed in Salem in 1980. So if I know a lot of people like talking about the Salem of yesteryear, particularly the Salem that existed before haunted happenings. And with Haunted Happenings starting in 1982, this dude walked around in 1980 with a 16 millimeter camera, shot all kinds of footage of the wharfs and stuff like that. And it got resurrected, digitized for the first time. And it's on there as a little 10-minute documentary narrated by a classic American actor. So yeah, if you're looking for a really quick last minute gift and you know somebody who just absolutely nerds out about old Salem, seeing like the old Chevys driving around and things like that, there you go.
Okay. All right. Paul, I don't know, gift ideas, Santa meetings, anything seasonal?
Well, I have a good negative story about the holidays. Do you like those kind of stories?
Well, yeah, you got to bring us down, man. We're getting too excited here.
That's our job, being the local reporter. Beverly New Year's Eve celebration, which they've held for how many years? Since 1994. They're not holding it this year.
Yeah.
Beverly Main Streets runs it, and they've done a great job over the years, but they rely a lot on volunteers. And since the pandemic, you know, it was off for a year or two, and then they haven't had a lot of people the last couple of years. So I think it's more on hold this year, you know, hopefully, because at one point it was a big event, you know, it was more like family oriented, and you could dress up in these costumes that this one woman made, these beautiful, like elaborate, you know, paper mache costumes, and march down Cabot Street. But sorry, my phone's going too. But anyway, it's not being held this year. But I talked to the people at Main Street, and they do hope to you know, get it going again next year if there's your renewed interest, both on people showing up and for volunteers. Sorry to bring everybody down, but that's the news.
All right. All right. Well, with that, we'll have to go find some holiday cheer somewhere. Oh boy, I love talking with you guys, and I love listening to the story. I really enjoy how you go after stories and learning about what reporters do. And I know that it's not easy. And when you flesh stories out, when you talk about them, they become much more valuable, I think, to me personally anyway. And I understand what you have to go through to get these. Some people don't. They think you just churn it out and you make a phone call or whatever. So I do appreciate that. Keep it coming. And you know what? Maybe you guys can do more cross-pollination there, because each of you covered the other person's turf. And that's I hope you get mileage for that, you know? So, but anyway, I want to wish you all a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. And we'll talk again in a couple of weeks.
All right. Thanks a lot,
Absolutely.
Rick.
See you on the
All
other
right.
side. Happy holidays.
Happy
care.
holidays indeed. Okay.